You are now live. So this is Senate Appropriations, and we're taking up bills that have been referred to the committee. And the first bill on our schedule this afternoon is H96. It's an act relating to creating the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the reporter of the bill, this came from Government Operations, is Senator Ron Hinsdale. So welcome and thank you. And we know that this bill does carry an appropriation, and that's the reason it has been referred here. So you want to just give us a quick overview, and then we can see the last page is where the money is.
Right, exactly. And there is a fiscal note that you may want to access as well. I can put on hand there so you get. For the record, Senator Ron Hinsdale, Chittenden County, and the reporter of H96. I suppose I should just start by saying that Senate Government Operations did not make any changes to the appropriation. So while we looked at some of the definitions and wording of things around the selection process, none of our changes impacted the appropriation.
But you did make amendments then to the bill as it was passed by the House.
Yes, yeah. I have the summary of the changes that we made. I could go through them. It was how we defined the particular populations that we were concerned around for the basis of the commission, and that so we changed people with a physical or mental disability and families of people with a physical or mental disability to adding psychiatric and condition, so that it didn't have to be someone's identified disability that might have been the source of their group's exclusion or oppression, systemic discrimination in some way. And we particularly added note about Black Vermonters being uniquely recognized as a population to experience truth and reconciliation. So I guess I could start by taking a big step back and saying this bill creates a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is a pretty big undertaking. And what I can say, I suppose, not just as the reporter of the bill, but the co-chair of the Social Equity Caucus, watching this unfold in the House over many, many more weeks than we have time to consider on our side, is that they really wanted to, they looked at models on Truth and Reconciliation Commissions around the world. They had direct testimony from Canada, those who worked on that Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Maine, and a few others, but there are maybe 40 to 50 Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in the world, and they looked at some of those different models. So the process that they came to, I think, our committee noted seemed to have a large price tag, but we are giving them a massive charge to look at systemic discrimination, institutional oppression and racism that was born out of, in some ways, the eugenics apology that we did last year, that an apology can feel hollow if not then tied to some remedy to the harm. And so that we, even in the language of our apology resolution, JRH2, we did talk about a process by which to repair the harm done from the eugenics movement and survey. So that does take center stage in who is part of the selection process, who is part of then the commissioners. There's 3 commissioners, and they each make a half salary of a judge in the state. And so those 3 commissioners' compensation is maybe the largest single appropriation. Then there's 30 panelists, I want to say. There's the selection panel, and then there's the 3 commissioners, and they are then able to, and there's an executive director for the group, and
they call them committee members.
Committee members, that's it, the 30 other folks.
In addition to the panelists, or
so that helps me make sure I don't confuse anyone further. So there is a 7-member selection panel, and that's important so that the intent there was to get outside of state government specifically to select then the commissioners. So then the 7-member, I'm looking at Dave and quizzing myself, the 7 members of the selection panel choose the 3 commissioners. Those people are what one might say well compensated. They are then compensated at the level of a full-time role. They choose their executive director, who is also
The 3 commissioners select the executive director.
Yes, it's similar to like the Cannabis Control Board, where they hire an executive director to administer their office. And they'll have staff as well under the executive director to assist them in their work.
So we have 7 members of a selection panel and that panel selects the 3 commissioners, and the 3 commissioners in turn hire an executive director.
Yep, and they also select committee members to assist them. And I'll let Senator Ron Hinsdale continue.
So just before that, when you say the executive director to run the office and they have staff, does that mean some of those 30 people? How's this all work?
So the director then is able to hire staff and have a budget.
And how many staff do they have? Do you know that
I
yet?
want to say 6?
3.
3, okay.
Yep. So that's what we budgeted for.
Okay.
Okay, I just saw a this year.
So I thought it was the 3 commissioners and then 4 staff.
Including the executive director.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So
There's
7 total
Yes.
paid employees in the fiscal year.
Stephanie probably knows because she wrote the fiscal.
Yeah, exactly, I know.
All right.
I don't know how much help I am to you all. This is helping me do a better floor report. But yes, so there are then 7 people who have a kind of permanent status. They are allowed up to 30 committee members to populate the commission's committee processes around different historic harms, and they each would be granted up to $1,000 stipend
So
annually.
that group that gets the $1,000, they could be like 5 might be looking at one particular area, and 10 might be looking at, okay.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be all 30 focused on
Sitting
it.
in my, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I guess if you follow the note, it's pretty long, the summary, the selection panel, and then how the salary sets all laid out for us. So I think you've got your testimony written right
I know,
here.
thank you.
The only thing different is the House bill had this appointment panel, which didn't really cost any money, but instead of, an appointment panel is creating the selection panel, I thought, at one point in the House, that's the version I had, but I'm just looking at Damien. The House version that I talked about, it doesn't really save you any money. It was less than $1,000 for the appointment panel.
There's basically 5 people tied to government who pick the hiring committee.
Okay.
But then the hiring committee, the idea is that they're not government employees, so that there's that sort of level of separation.
There is one, though, while we are looking at this, there is one wrinkle potentially, which is the executive director of the Human Rights Commission came before our committee and said she did not have capacity to do this. So we changed it to the Vermont Center for Independent Living executive director. That would carry a different cost than someone who is part of state government.
Are you talking about Sarah London?
Yes.
Yeah,
But she's compensated through, she would be probably doing this through
she's a
her.
state employee or?
No.
The time is on these pieces are de minimis. The major cost is in the 7 people.
I just didn't want
And the operating.
That is something in the fiscal note that we changed is.
We did hear from Bournier saying that there was so many requests for her time
Yeah.
that she just had to be honest about how much more she could.
Yeah, exactly. And Director Lauderdale is very happy to be included in this. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can and you may.
So I see we put in that in the fiscal summary, the first year is 748, and then it says 20 to 24, it's 1.3 annually. So Then that's where you get to the 4.5.
Yeah, for 3.5 years duration.
So it's
And
three
there's
and a-
been some discussion about the duration, and a lot would depend, I'm sure, in terms of the actual progress.
Exactly.
And it might be, the work might be completed by year 3 or 2.5 or something like that.
Right. Yeah, certainly when they looked at models around the world, there was not the intention to make them permanent or ongoing. There was the intention to try and excavate issues, address them, and repair harm, and then focus on resources that would go to that reconciliation after the commission excavated those harms.
Can I ask a
Is
question?
this all
Wait,
water,
wait just a second. Senator Westman and then Senator Sears.
and this is all accounted for?
The 748 is accounted for in FY '23. If this becomes law, then the budget will have to accommodate the 1.3 estimated cost when you go to the court. And the cost may change a little bit on what people choose for things, in terms of healthcare, retirement, et cetera.
Senator Sears.
Senate Judiciary Committee has been working on a bill that we voted out, I think yesterday or Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday was yesterday. On covenants and deeds that were restrictive based on racial and religious. And I don't see anything here about religious discrimination, but just based upon that work that we just finished, I think it's unfortunate if individuals who have been discriminated on the basis of religion are not included here.
Now, Damien has got a response to that.
So the bill language was based on, it started from the apology for eugenics. So it's really designed as a follow-on to that. However, recognizing that a lot of that discrimination overlapped with other forms of discrimination in Vermont's history, there's language that was included at the end of the populations there that says, and any other populations or communities that were discriminated against in state law or policy, in the discretion of the commissioners. So the commissioners have discretion to go broader, but the goal was to try to focus on eugenics to avoid making their charge so large that they couldn't complete the work in 3 years. That was one of the concerns, is they did discuss making it a broader charge, but left it here to try to make it something that could be accomplished in 3 years.
So it doesn't preclude it.
It doesn't preclude it.
From being considered.
Oh, but I think it's a mistake, a real error to not, if you're going to recognize discrimination in Vermont and patterns, the covenants that were in, kind of funny because it was in Coventry where most of the covenants existed against persons of the Hebrew faith.
And I agree, though. I agree with Dick. I had that circle.
After just having worked on that,
Yeah.
bill, I feel very uncomfortable with voting for a bill that doesn't recognize that discrimination when we recognize individuals with French Canadian, French Indian, and I know they were discriminated against. My wife's French Canadian heritage. And I'm not trying to minimize any other group, but I think that actually what we learned during our work on that bill is instructive. So.
Well, I think what you're saying is that actually was a fairly widespread practice and affected maybe more lives than, I don't know, or as many lives as the listed populations here. So Senator Baruth and then.
So just to speak to Dick's point, so I'm remembering the ethnic studies bill, which came through Ed when I was chairing that. It was a very similar dynamic that came up at the 11th hour where we had language that had come from the House and there was a push to address religious discrimination, which, as testimony broadened, could include discrimination against evangelicals, for instance. And the worry among the stakeholders who had produced the bill was that it would wind up being redirected toward discrimination against populations that hadn't been contemplated in the original, but who also, in that instance, weren't thought to have experienced the same kind of, or the same level of discrimination. So in looking at this, I take Damien's point, the commissioners have discretion to add to their own charge at their own discretion. I don't know how others feel about this. I don't feel like it's necessarily our job in appropriations to go into that level of policy work. Because what we're supposed to be deciding on is the appropriations. So I take Dick's point, but I think we did in that other bill, we addressed the original purpose of that bill, which was religious and racial covenants, and we included both of them in our work. So I wouldn't want to get involved with.
Okay, what you're saying is if somebody wanted to tinker, they'd have to do it as an individual amendment, not on it.
Right.
I'd like to say that when I read this, that's the first thing I thought of also. There was a lot of anti-Semitism. And in the covenant bill and some of the responses to it, there was much more of a focus on the Black population. And in fact, in some parts of the state, it was more anti-Semitic than anti-Black. Neither one is good. And I think somebody in this building spoke to me about that piece, that it didn't seem to, nobody was really focusing on the anti-Semitic piece other than it is in the bill and you can't do it and all that. But I think this is bad that we don't include, particularly it's the Jewish population that clearly it was anti-Semitic. And I think to ignore that here is bad.
Well, but would you be averse to amending on the floor with individual names rather than having the appropriations?
Well, I think that's really, I think Senator Baruch's point is well taken, that we are looking at the money. If we feel that the composition, then that's something that people who want to sponsor an amendment to change the language should do more as an individual amendment, not a committee.
Fine. I mean, I have to admit, I don't want to vote for the bill that does not even acknowledge, I mean, it says other populations. You know, I think that's unjust. I think it's a further slap in the face of, showing anti-Semitism again. And I think that it's not right, so.
I'm not sure if that's the only, when I agree with Dick when he mentions, all you have to do is go into the museum in the Woolen Mill in Winooski and look at all the French Canadian kids that were shoved into the Woolen Mill with no shoes and kids dying all the time because they were sucked into machines.
They were in my area too. They weren't of any specific ethnic group. They were just young
Well,
children.
in places like Winooski, it was all French Canadian.
But you had different populations depending on the nature and the mining. You have
But I'm just saying.
and then certainly in the quarries and Barry, you have and
Finns.
I mean, we had, what was the ads that would say no Irish need apply. So there's a host. I guess I'm gonna suggest if people feel passionately that we need to have it more explicit around religious discrimination, I think maybe today Muslim.
Right.
It's one that is right there first and foremost in terms of.
It is now.
So it is now, Alice, I agree, but historically, when we look at that.
Well, can I just suggest that if Damien would be willing to put an amendment together for myself and Senator Nitka or anybody else who wants to join, I'd like to do that. And ask Senator White and ask Senator Ron Hinsdale to ask the Government Operations Committee to look at that.
And we can, we'll do that for us, Dave, for Senator Sears, didn't
Yeah, of course.
All right, and then once it's drafted, you can take it back and whether the committee will view it as a friendly amendment or whatever.
Yeah, if I could just respond, from what I think we were tempted to also broaden the charge of the group and, look at state sanctioned historic harms that have happened. So I understand covenants were, the state looked the other way. They were certainly sanctioned. I don't know how much the Department of Tourism or whatever existed at the time was sort of helping encourage or put those in place. There are other groups in history that have been discriminated against. And I think the way that it relates to the Appropriations Committee is that you'd probably have to appropriate a lot more money if we were to try and address all of the harms that have happened in the state. And I say that as a Jewish person. So, I understand the amendment. I think when we were tempted to really broaden things out, we would go back to the House. That took a lot of testimony, and I believe some of their testimony, probably, my sense is it encouraged them to have a focus at the outset and to think about other deep state sanctioned harms. But I do think there's some agreement that the two of the populations in the country that experienced the most state sanctioned from top to bottom harm were Black Americans and Indigenous people, where our entire government was built on their either oppression or erasure. That does feel different than, all other harms that have been caused to certain communities. And we included specifically, people with disabilities or conditions and French Canadian folks because of the desire to really have the group look at the eugenics survey as one of Vermont's contributions of a great harm to this world and having a very central role in
So
that.
were French Canadians swept into the eugenics?
Yes.
In a significant number, that's what you're.
Yes. And that's why it also uses the term French Indian, because there was a lot of intermarrying. As Old North End. I mean, everyone probably has populations where they know there were French Indians living where they were systemically targeted for as feeble-minded or criminalized and sterilized.
I think probably along the Canadian border, up North Troy, I think.
Just going river.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, family has it that Sybil Royce was one of the last Abenaki speaking, who was great-great-grandmother, husband's side. So,
That begs the question, if you use the term French Indian, shouldn't it be French Native American?
It is a historic term as far as I know, and I do think what we heard from some of the families who have had people impacted by sterilization in their lives is French Indian is still the term they would use to refer to that historic group of people.
The language was taken directly from the eugenics apology, and that was based on testimony from the impacted populations. So I think Native American would be the preferred term now, or better yet, Indigenous.
Right.
But this is taken from the eugenics apology to focus on those impacts. So
I'm sorry, but that's,
all right, so did you have another comment? Your preference would be to use Indigenous?
do you
That
want
is at the top. So it says individuals who identify as Native American or Indigenous. And then later they use the terms that were not seen to be offensive. No one came forward and said, this is offensive to me because I am erased by this term. Native American and Indigenous is above, and this is a term specifically for the families that were impacted and how they identify themselves. This isn't using language about how they were identified. French Indian comes, I don't want to speak for anybody, but this is how people I know from that community identify, not, it's different than saying I'm Indigenous, which they might also use as a term in another context.
Other comments that are serious? Shall we move on?
I just, no, but I, anyway, I won't comment any further. Just get me in trouble.
All right, well, we don't want to do that to you. You've got your hands full as it is. So shall we keep going? And we've got sort of the selection panel, we've got the commission.
I do have a question.
Yes,
Um,
on what page?
So it's a question about, on page 14, under executive director, it says the executive director shall be a full-time state employee. And I take that to mean become when hired a full-time state employee. It's elsewhere in the bill when it names the commissioners and the qualities they should have, it says they shall be blah, blah, blah. So here, it's a little
It should
confusing.
be almost the executive director position shall be full-time
Right,
and shall be exempt.
because it sounds like you're trolling for a
But
full-time state
Damien probably is
employee.
gonna say that
So
that's the
This
right.
is the language we use whenever we're creating one of these positions. So it's no different than when we create the position of executive director at another agency.
Well,
And it refers to the executive director in the present tense when they're in that role. The executive director, as the executive
Well-
director shall be.
look at page 9.
I understand what you're saying, but this is,
Look at page 9.
But you're wrong, apparently.
but no, I'm just saying that you're,
Hang on. Baby and I work together a lot. Now, this is my first time seeing you in
few
for
years.
years. So it says the three
So he
commissioners,
doesn't want to give up the opportunity, apparently, Damien.
well, the
Page
three
9.
commissioners selected by the panel shall be residents of Vermont. So it's the exact same language that you're using elsewhere where you say that they shall be a full-time state employee. So it seems to me there's a reasonable confusion there that
You're probably overreading it.
maybe, it was a question to the senators, so.
Do you want to respond, Damien? You say,
So I am happy to draft it as the executive director position shall be a full-time state position.
If you don't think
Exempt
there's
from
any,
the classified service and use that language if you prefer, but this is literally, I mean, this is like the standard language that we draft for positions. And I understand that we are also saying the commissioners shall, upon selection, be residents of Vermont and not be members of the selection panel and have knowledge of the problems and challenges facing the populations. I mean, if it's really an issue for the committee, I'm happy to change that wording, but it's,
I flagged it
it
if
would,
there was confusion, if you think it's,
in both cases, this is how we do it in each instance, so I don't think there will be confusion.
I'm confused about the confusion. Are you saying that, are you saying that what it looks like is that they shall come from elsewhere and already have been a full-time state employee? Like they have to have come fully formed as a state employee?
well,
you could read it that way, that you're hiring only from the ranks of the.
from the pool of state employees.
Okay.
In other words, you wouldn't be creating a position.
But it could be like the executive, after in line 8, sub A, the commissioner shall appoint an executive director. The executive director position is established as a full-time state employee.
We can do that if you prefer.
I wonder if Damien's concern is that if it becomes misaligned with how we say everything else, it looks like it was somehow
Well, we
special.
do need to establish
No,
a
it's fine.
position. Are we
Yeah.
doing it in another place?
It's fine, we can do that. It works if that works for the committee.
Well, but
We're not
language
establishing.
aside, are we establishing a new position here? Are we creating a new position?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
and normally don't we create it? I
We
don't,
usually use the words established or created.
yeah,
Oh, a position is created.
yes.
Oh, I see.
So the executive director position is established as a full-time state
Because
employee.
only the legislature can create or establish positions, and we do it in the budget or in bills. And this doesn't explicitly create the position.
I can see that, yeah, but yes, it's like a position is established and then, this is how it's selected and then it is from there or
The
on.
nature of this position as a
Yeah,
full-time state employee.
perhaps we need to make it official that we're creating the position.
Right. I
Because-
might still give Senator Bruce a hard time for splitting hairs, but that will be your amendment.
Well,
The
his
position
one
was
other
created.
job is precisely that.
Yes, no, I.
It does point out the fact that we need a position created and only the legislature can authorize the creation. And
Right.
we need to be explicit about it.
Does it, and then actually that begs the question for me. poor Damien, does that mean that the position itself has to be repealed, or it is all repealed, the position's repealed with the repeal of, with the sunset of the commission?
That's a good question, because that's what I was just gonna ask. I'm glad you asked.
To be limited service?
Well, no, it's an exempt position, so, usually it's only,
So if that's the case, then we should be creating an exempt position for the executive director and 3 limited service positions for the staff. I imagine the limited service positions would run through.
They would all be,
we don't need to put an end date on.
no, they would all be limited service, and they'd all be exempt. It's just that the nature of, that you're expecting them to be full-time.
We're very happy you're here, Damien, to help us write this, but.
But the question, with the sunset of the commission, does the position sunset as well?
I think,
It should.
it
Yeah.
should, and so perhaps we can,
Has to.
it has to, you're right.
And the nature of their exemptness means they're,
Yeah, the position sunset. And you have a sunset for this too, don't you?
the whole
Okay.
thing.
By 26.
Yeah, all right. The commission is repealed, so perhaps everything goes with it. Inherent in that statement, that is that perhaps an omnibus repeal and sunset? So that if you're eliminating the commission, you're eliminating the executive, you're
They're all part of
eliminating the
the commission.
positions
They're all
and everything as part of that statement,
Part
repeal
of this.
statement.
It's all this chapter, right, that you're creating.
Yeah. So maybe that takes care of it. Section 4.
It should be clear.
Well, the repeal says the commission is repealed, then the question that is everything associated with the commission, including the limited service positions and the executive director.
Right, that,
All included in that statement.
Because it refers to the whole chapter.
I think the
They're all
whole
in that.
chapter goes, so probably
Sure.
the positions would go when the commission goes.
Right, typically we create and eliminate positions in session law. So, I think it probably makes sense to do it that way unless you wanted to create a separate section authorizing the positions in that chapter. And just say, the executive director position is authorized as a full-time exempt position.
For the
And then-
duration of the commission or for the lifetime of the commission, I don't know, can we?
Well,
It wasn't given if you put it in the statute here.
if you put it in the chapter, then it's just repealed
Yeah.
at that time, and so there's no more authorization of law for it. If you put it in session law, we would need to just say is authorized, is created and shall cease to exist on.
It sounds like it makes sense to actually create positions within the chapter since it's unlimited.
I would think so, and just have it's all in one place.
Yep.
As long as it's clear that the commission and the authorized positions all are repealed on July 21st of 2026.
Mhm.
And I don't know, is that repeal language there, does it do all that? And repeal
Well,
the
it'll-
commission and everything that goes with it?
Repeals the entire authorization of the commission, so everything that lets the commission exist repeals on that date. So.
So then the positions would be repealed. Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep.
So I feel like this is kind of if you give a mouse a cookie, but in the commissioner part, it doesn't necessarily create the positions.
Well, we're going to have some language to.
So both in the executive director and the commissioner, so it'll say the commissioner
The three
positions are
positions.
created.
The three.
Okay.
Did you, so just out of curiosity here, did you have language creating the positions for the members of the Cannabis Control Board who are also for the PUC?
Well, I know we just created, I know,
Because that, yeah, because those are basically appointed positions like that, versus the executive director,
Who are,
who's more of a regular state
Yeah.
employee.
Yeah.
So I think that's, not to start getting too lawyerly here, but that would be my concern is if we start doing it for these, then for any commission or board you create in the future with full-time members, you need identical language versus if we just appoint those members and say this is their salary.
that's a
And then
given,
for
they're
staff,
creating.
we're creating the staff
Yeah.
positions. So that,
I would think you've already created the three positions by the nature of the way the commissioners. And what you need to create is the executive director and the three staff positions.
all right,
I'm set on that.
Well, I just want to make sure that it's clear whoever's hired and if the commission actually ends on July 1, 2026 is aware that the positions are in.
Right, I think if you're recruiting, you should make it very clear that that it's a time limited, and it could actually end earlier if in fact the work and the goal, the alignment's been completed. I doubt that, but,
It might even continue after the.
I don't know. So what we have here, so Damien, is that something we probably should, we can do that, the committee can do that amendment.
I'm already drafting that
I see.
amendment for you as we talk.
Okay, and then the appropriation, I know that GovOps spent a lot of time on this, we're looking at, and ended up just feeling that,
I think it's, really,
that there was nothing,
Yeah.
that could be, skinny down. In other words, what came over seemed to be, what it would take to staff such an initiative.
certainly when you take into account the many outside voices to our normal processes that were heard in the House General Committee, it seems like, a process for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is just as important as the outcome. And this is a more expensive, inefficient, and, intentional process, and that was what was valued over efficiency and reducing costs. I think
That was the conclusion.
that was the conclusion, and given the charge that these commissioners have, and they're making half of what a Superior Court judge makes, I don't think it's an unreasonable amount of money to pay people who are probably going to do, as we talked about today, extensive emotionally charged work. So we didn't see any places where we really questioned the cost in terms of the
And so what is the salary? I'm assuming you're saying the starting salary of a Superior Court judge, so what is that?
So it's half of the starting salary, is my understanding, so $84,500.
$84,500 would be the starting salary.
Double that with the family insurance.
No, about a third,
More.
no, it's about a third of the salary.
A third of the salary would be for benefits on top of that, is that correct?
That'd be probably one.
I would have to look, that's a good question, I would have to look to see if does it have to be statutorily written that they are afforded benefits?
If they're,
It says, okay, commissioners shall be full-time state employees. So it also does create them as full-time state employees, shall be exempt from the state classified system. They shall receive compensation equal to 1/2 that of a Superior Court judge. So I think we looked at the $84,500 as salary, but maybe that isn't, in addition, there's also benefits if you're just saying
salary
compensation.
and benefits.
Okay.
And usually, I think
Healthcare.
benefits are about a third of salary,
Okay,
so just roughly speaking.
as long as the fiscal note makes sense in that regard, it says about $1 million for 7 people, then I trust.
the majority of cost is salary and benefits.
Yes.
We can do 465 very quickly. I'd like to get that done before.
Are we done with this one?
Um,
No, we have to vote.
No, we haven't finished this. Any other questions about this? But we're gonna move the amendment, which Damien is constructing as we sit here.
I'm working on it. When would you like it back? Because I can work more quickly in my office.
Sure.
And then I have a pretty full schedule today, but I can come back with the amendment whenever it works, either today or tomorrow.
Okay. We're going to a committee of conference at 3, so
Okay.
we're probably gonna have to move this out tomorrow.
Okay.
Do people feel comfortable with just making the positions, the technical changes to move the bill?
Yeah.
And so that we can, all right. So do you want to move, I need a motion to move the amendment. Senator a motion made by Senator Brew, seconded by Senator Starr. To move the amendment. You want to call the roll, please?
Sure, Senator Fallon, Senator Ruth, yes. Senator Mitchell,
Yes.
Senator Sears. Senator Sears,
Yes. Yes.
It's on the amendment.
Senator
Yeah.
Starr,
Yes.
Senator West,
Yes.
and Senator Kitchen.
Yes. Now we'll move the bill favorably as amended. I need a motion.
I'll move.
Okay, Senator Westman, second. Seconded by Senator Starr.
Senator Fallon, Senator Ruth, yes. Senator Mitchell,
No, with explanation.
Senator Sears. Can you repeat, Dick?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes. Senator Starr. Senator West.
Yes.
Senator Kitchen.
Yes.
Okay. Explanation from Senator.
I'm voting against the bill at this time until I see an amendment that addresses the issue that has so very recently come up in this building that is not really addressed here, and we're very well aware of it with regard to anti-Semitism. And I think this committee is big enough that it would be able to encompass that.
And I expect that you and Senator Sears, we've already made a request for an amendment to add.
Yes, which today, right?
Yeah, you have
Yes.
enough information.
And just to clarify, do you want it to be on the basis of individuals who identify as Jewish or individuals who identify as a particular religion that was then discriminated against?
I think I would prefer religious discrimination.
I think so too. If you're gonna do it, it seems like
Right.
you can select.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to clarify. That's what I had in my notes, but I wanted to make sure I didn't get that wrong.
Thank you. And you have to probably rush off to another meeting.
And we'll get the Senate Appropriations Amendment, Damien, so I can get it to the Senate Secretary's office. We'll do that.
Yeah, I'll get it out as fast as I can and
Great.
hopefully send it to you by the end of the day.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
So I'll report all of this back to the committee unless you don't want the amendment shared until you have it.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you so much. We have Aaron with us, and Senator Colmore's gonna pop in too. Okay, Stephanie?
Okay, our concern was that there be, before a department went ahead and increased the amount, there were really 2 steps, one of which is if you're proposing it as part of the budget and it's reviewed and we authorize it as part of that. But there might be times when waiting until that budget cycle doesn't make sense. And so I had suggested, and Senator White concurred, for the flexibility that when we're not in session, that they could increase the per diem because based on experience and not being able to get individuals, we wanted to give some flexibility, and that's why number 3 is there, and she felt was a good addition to what they were doing. We did not put an upper limit at this point. We thought we would see. The concern was the minute you put an upper limit, then just like it'll become the standard. And then we can always do that, subsequently depending on actual experience, a year from now or 2 years from now. So that's, I think, what we were talking about in terms of our concern around the bill. Fortunately, Cameron was able to listen to our conversation, and then I guess we had a cloakroom discussion about the flexibility, and I did talk to Senator White, and she liked that
Do
provision.
you want a motion to move the amendment?
Yeah, I think I would like to, just,
Before we do that, who is reporting truth and reconciliation? General government?
I don't know. But Alice, volunteer, anybody want to volunteer? All right, Senator Baru. Now we're on to boards and commissions.
Thank you, sir.
And so we have an amendment from the committee. Does anyone want to move this amendment?
Move it.
All right, Senator Westman, Senators. Aaron, did I adequately describe what this amendment does? If there's anything you want to add, please feel free.
For the record, Ameren Aberdaily Legislative Council, I do believe that was everything. I just wanted to mention that in section 10, I did adjust the effective dates slightly so that the new section 9 will be effective on passage. The repeal of the boards and the inactive boards and commissions in sections 1 through 7 of the underlying bill will be effective upon passage. And then the actual change to the per diem that's currently in statute from a static $50 to a floor of $50 will take effect on July 1st, 2023 to give the administration time to put forth their proposal for per diems for fiscal year 24.
Yes, with regard to state employees who, I don't know what they get paid for their role in this, but is it comparable to the $50 or is it more or less? Or are they going to get a bump up if the people that are sitting beside are getting, say, $100 a day or whatever, what they
State
want?
employees are
Their
they are-
regular salary?
Their regular,
No, not the regular salary. What do they get for when they're on a committee during the summer? What's the per diem that they get?
state employees?
Not state employees, a legislator.
Oh, they get our standard for,
What is our?
it's like $120 or something.
Yeah, they were getting more than double what they get. And don't we
Well, no,
feel
you might not,
overpriced?
might not be more than double, they might be getting more than you, which is okay, but just.
Oh,
wondering what
it could be that depending on a couple of years from now, yeah.
Well, in a couple of years, but right now, if it's $50 and it's $120.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we have a motion, Senator Westman, you will move? Yeah. Okay, and did we have a second, Senator? Second, Senator Nitka,
This is just on the amendment.
just on the amendment,
Okay.
because it's from the Appropriations Committee.
Senator Ballard, Senator Baruch, yes. Senator Nitt,
Do you see the
Yes.
amendment?
Senator Sears,
Yes.
Senator Stonehash, Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Kitchen.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, a motion to move the bill favorably as
So
amended.
moved.
Senator Westman, seconded by Senator Starr.
Senator Ballard, Senator Baruch, yes. Senator Nitt,
Yes.
Senator Sears,
Yes.
Senator Starr. Yeah. Senator Westman, Senator Kitchen.
Yes. And your committee, I had talked to Jeanette earlier and
Yeah,
she was happy with what we were proposing to do.
there were 2 other amendments which really I don't think have anything of interest to this committee, but we're going to add someone to the We're gonna add a ski patrol person
Oh,
to the
yes.
list. And we were gonna add like the Secretary of State's office, which is sort of outside the normal agency work, because they don't have general funds, they get funded by the fees. And that would be part of this as well. If that makes any sense.
So the boards and commissions within OPR and the Secretary of State.
Yes, exactly.
Be distinct from the executive branch
Yeah.
under.
And they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for stopping
No.
by.
And thank you all for your work on the other bill that we did pass earlier. That was critical. It really, really was. And,
Are you talking about the clean heat standard bill?
yes. I really think that was great work.
Thank you very much.
It's always good to see you, even briefly.
Even briefly. Okay, so,
Toast, I can smell something.
And who reports boards and commissions?
I guess it's general government.
Was OPR.
General government?
Well, who wants to volunteer? Bobby, all right, Senator Smith. At this point, whoever raises
Yeah,
their
it doesn't
hand.
matter really,
All right, that's great.
Senator Starr, would
Yeah.
you fill that out and bring that to the Senate Secretary's office?
And, Phil, you can't take up the other one until
Yes, I
you
did.
get the amendment.
And I made a note, I let them know we voted, but we're waiting on the amendment, and I CC'd you, Senator Burris.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Am I supposed to reply all?
No, you just, I said that once we
Oh,
actually
that-
get the amendment, I'll have
That
it
was
on
the
the
old
down.
system.
Yeah, I'll bring it on the wall.
Or they can come down, one or the other.
Are we ready to?
Yes, we're